the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com. Expert insights on buying and selling farmland in Western Canada.
Welcome back to the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com, where we bring you expert insights into the process of buying and selling farmland here in Western Canada. I'm Devon Davidson, your host. If you haven't already, please take a minute to like, rate, and review the show. It really helps us out, and we would really appreciate it. On today's episode, we're talking about soil classifications in Western Canada and how they pertain to selling farmland. And to help us with that conversation, as always, Roy Carter, CEO of CLHbid.com. Roy, thanks for being here. And we've also brought in a special guest, Tim Garner, who is a former instructor at Fairview College and a farmer here in the Peace Country. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Yep, thank you.
So before we jump into our conversation, maybe just let our listeners know a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do, what your background is.
Yeah, I grew up in that Spruce Grove area, West Edmonton, and went to university. And after university, I worked for an agricultural chemical company for 5 years. And then I decided to buy some land in the Peace Country, and which I did. Then I joined the college because I could work part-time and tried to make the farm go. And I taught in the area of turfgrass management, which is mostly golf course people, and agriculture diploma program. And since leaving the college, I started a small spraying company, mostly industrial in the oil field. And in the winter, I do some teaching online webinars for pesticide applicators.
Okay, you're a busy guy. Sounds like you'll have lots of knowledge to share with us then, for sure. Could you maybe start by giving us a high-level overview of what is soil classification and why was it developed in Canada?
Well, it first started, first of all, the glaciers left 12,000 years ago. And so then this is what we're left with, this parent material. And the governments wanted to know what was arable. And Canada is the second largest country in the world, I believe, and it's but only less than 10% is farmable. And so they wanted to know what was farmable and what wasn't farmable. And so they came up with I call them two classification systems, one provincial and one more of a federal program. And so in the 1850s, Palliser on his horse was riding around Western Canada, and it's interesting. He declared a Palliser triangle, which went from Calgary to almost south of Saskatoon and just to the west part of Winnipeg, and he declared it uninhabitable. No one should move into that area.
Oh boy!
No one can farm that area. And today, that's one of the most productive bread baskets in the world.
Yeah, that's incredible, actually. Wow. So then where did that data come from then? Like, did they actually walk the land? We were talking about this a little bit offline. It's interesting. Like, how do they know there's bush quarters and stuff where those lines are still pretty distinct?
Yeah, so I did some reading on it. And so each province, and they started before the 20s, but not really after, and then it got going after the 20s and into the 30s. And so each province, you got to realize there was no internet, no cell phones, no power. And so they couldn't communicate with each other, I'm sure, pretty well. So each province kind of, depending on who the lead scientist was or the researcher, they kind of followed that system. And many of the systems were based on the Russian system and we still use that today. The soils like Chernozemic, Solinetzik, Luvasolic are all Russian words. And so then the provincial would go at it for a couple of years and then they'd lose funding, stop, go funding again, start again. And what they did is in the 30s, the guys would leave June 1st on horseback and go into the bush with pack horses and come out September 30th. And so actually what you're saying, yeah, they walked much of the land. And I can't believe how accurate they were with the technology of that day.
That's really interesting. So how long would that process have taken? You threw some dates out there, but...
Yeah, well, they'd go for 2 years, then get funding would be cut for 2 years. They'd go, and so it occurred over in 1955. They started using helicopters,
Okay.
right, for the first time, and so it's been an ongoing process, and it'll still be ongoing. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but boy, it's pretty darn good for the work that they did that long time ago.
Yeah. So how often are those maps updated then? I mean, does it happen frequently or is it infrequent?
No, it's very infrequent. It's all related to funding and stuff like that because it's government.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, free enterprise isn't going to fund it. Governments have to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see it still occurring in the future, but we'll have so much more technology. Drones, helicopters, satellites,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we'll get more accurate. But they're not that bad, right?
Yeah, no, as you said, they're incredibly accurate for when they were implemented and the technology they had at the time. We'll dive into the tech side of it a little bit later, but before that, I just wanted to kind of ask you, what are some of the differences between the Canada Land Inventory System and those provincial classification systems? There's some differences there, right?
Yes. The Canada Land Inventory is more of a broad view. It has a rating of 1 to 7, 1 being the best, 7 being bad, and then they have an organic rating. And so, and then they rate things like slope and stoniness and climate, where the Alberta or the provincial ones go way deeper. They go they go down, drill down. They look at soil profiles. They look at management practices. A soil profile is, let's say, the top 3 feet of the soil. They'll dig down. They'll do pH measurements. So it was far more in detail than Canada Land Inventory. But I really like Canada Land Inventory to begin with.
Okay.
That's my first go-to is pull out the CLI map.
Yep.
So when they were, sorry, Devon.
No, go ahead.
When they were in the 30s and out on horseback, obviously they weren't sending samples to a lab. This would be just basically assessment of these people in the field then, eh? So every night or whatever, they would write up their assessment of what they saw, eh?
Yeah, they may had little pH kits but you're right. There was no labs then, or the labs would be hundreds of miles away. And so I just can't believe how accurate they were with the tools that they had.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
It's pretty mind-blowing, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned sort of those, like provincially or regionally, they'll dive deeper, right? They get into a lot more testing. So how does that impact how farmers and appraisers interpret soil quality? Is that something that they look at?
Well, they should.
Yeah.
If they don't, they should. That's the first thing I do, because land is very variable. One quarter may be a number 2, and the next quarter may be a number 5. Mm-hmm. The one thing about farmers, I imagine most of your land sells to local people in lots of cases.
Totally. 98% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they'll be familiar with it because they've drove by that field 30 years in a row.
Yeah.
And so they may not have to go to the soil maps because they're so familiar with it. They might as well have been farming it because they see it every day. Where you look at groups coming in from Europe or maybe the Hutterite Brethren, they would need to really do some research, if they're moving into a brand new area. And that would be the first spot is look at Canada Land Inventory, hire an agrologist, look at the Alberta Soil Survey or Saskatchewan Soil Survey or whatever. And so I look at it automatically because any land that comes up, you don't know what's 2 miles down the road. You think but you don't.
It's funny, when I first started with CLH, there was that sale in Viking, Roy, that we had those 2 quarters that were, 5 miles apart or something, and one sold really well and the other didn't, and it was, I think, because of it was alkali or something in the one quarter, but the locals knew, right?
And totally. That's a good example. I was thinking about that when I was listening.
As
to
you're
Tim.
saying, yeah.
The lady there, she was in her 80s, and it was appraised, and that the one by the airport was Solinetzik heavy, and she knew it was the poorer quarter by far. Mm-hmm. And she when she called us to sell, she said the appraiser is wrong. He's got the quarters wrong. And here's this lady, 86 years old, saying the appraiser's wrong, and I know my land, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly what Tim's saying.
Yeah. Well, so that probably answers. I had a question to ask you later, but can a farmer just look at soil and sort of say, I know what it is, or I know what it should be?
No, not necessarily. Only with experience of living nearby, you may have some of that experience. But other than that, no. You can look at the color, and if it's black, it's that's a good sign.
Yeah, for sure.
It's black.
Okay. When it comes to farmland sales, how important would you say soil classification is? And is that CLI number as important as we once thought it was?
I think it makes my decision whether I'm going to buy the land or not. I don't want to buy if I want to farm crops like wheat and canola and barley. I'm not going to buy a number 5 soil. Nope. You're just not going to get very good crops, and so you've got to look at that and realize what you're going to get into. I was actually looking at bidding on some CLH land, but one quarter was number 5, and no, I wasn't going to bid. No, because what am I going to do with it? Now, if you had cattle, it's a little different story.
Sure.
Because cattle, it's basically permanent pasture at the best, and and so if you have cattle, then there's some hope. But other than that,
Well, and I asked that question because, Roy, we talked about the land around Bow Island. You said some guys down there actually don't mind class 5 soil because it's irrigated, and so maybe you go into some of the reasoning there. I don't know, but
yeah, I definitely don't know what Tim knows, but we have sold a fair amount of land, or we've got a fair amount of land up for sale in that area, and listening to the beet and potato guys and that. The water solves a lot of problems, and it seems like they want percolation, and they don't want the heavy soils and that, maybe sandier, lighter. And so the number scares them a bit less when they can use their iPhone in town and turn on water on.
yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah. And so these guys are saying they're surprised what they can do with a 4 or 5 with potatoes and that.
Right.
But it's only because of those pivots and water is what I see.
For sure.
Yeah, when I first came out of university and I wanted to buy some land, I says, land, the land doesn't matter. I can add nutrients, I can add water, no big deal. Well, I was wrong, right? Yeah. But when you have irrigation and you need drainage, all of a sudden poor land becomes really good land, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So sort of as a follow-up there then, Tim, does a CLI rating of a 1 or 2 automatically mean the land is going to sell more per acre? Or do you look at the subclass? How important is the subclass? Things like drainage, salinity, stoniness, all of that factor into it?
So we have no number 1 land up in the Peace Country that I know of, right? I've ever seen it on the map. And so what happens if one of the subclasses is so severe, they'll downrate number 1 to number 2. And I believe that's what happened in the Peace because of climate. When they first came up here, probably frost, early August was very common, which is not anymore, but it was. And so that's kind of built into the system right away, so that you'll get a down rating of the class with one of those subclasses, if it's severe enough. Okay. And so I look at the subclass because, I did buy some land with lots of stones, and that's a lot of work. Right, and it causes a lot of hassle, for growing things such as peas and stuff like that. And so,
a lot of work for J&A, probably.
Yeah. Oh, we picked a lot of rocks by hand. Oh man, but and so you got to look at the subclasses. Can be important, and 1 quarter may be stony, and 2 miles away there may be no stones, and so it's all depending on what the glacier left behind.
In your view, what's the order of importance in terms of soil characteristics? Like if Tim's saying this is good land, what's sort of the order of importance when you look at that?
Well, the rating number 1, number 2, I look at that right away. Okay. And then as soon as I look at that, then I go to the soil survey for the provincial and see what the series are. And what's important and what we lack up in the Peace Country is organic matter. Organic matter is just like magic. It provides fiber, it provides nutrients, it provides water holding capacity, it provides aeration. It's magical. And so if I had a poor crop this year, but if my soil would have had 4 or 5% organic matter, I'd have had double the crop. I'm convinced of it, regardless of what fertilizer or anything. So organic matter is important. So I'm always looking for number 1 or number 2 plus black organic matter, right? But the organic matter is not on the CLI rating.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And on the flip side, what are the biggest risks to soil quality? Erosion, acidity?
Depending on where you are, the South has got alkalinity problems. Us in the Peace Country, we have acidity problems. Many of our soils are lower pH, and as soon as you get to lower pH, you just don't grow the crops. And to rectify the problem, it's not cheap, and it takes not 10 pounds of lime per acre. It takes thousands of pounds of lime per acre. So now you got to source the lime, you got to put it on. And so many people, I see lime piles around, but not many people can afford to do that. But so you got to look at these other factors, absolutely.
Well, so that's a nice segue into this next segment here. We want to talk about micronutrients, zinc, copper, lime, boron, manganese, and then some of the restrictions that are placed on soil. So could you maybe give us a quick overview of the restrictions that are in place?
So most of our soils in Western Canada are deficient in nitrogen, right, and phosphorus. Most of the soils are high in potassium. Sulfur is a problem for us in the Peace. But the micronutrients are, so what happens when the glacier left? It left behind something called parent material. And in that parent material, much of it, I've never had any micronutrients in my life of farming. But depending on what you're farming and the crops you're farming, you may be adding micronutrients. But the word micro means you need very little amounts of them, right? Where the macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, you need lots of them. Most of our soils have lots of calcium and magnesium, and so the 4 major fertilizers are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur.
Okay. Can these restrictions be managed or significantly reduced through micronutrients?
Micronutrients to me are not that big an issue. It would, but it would be more for the specialty crops. Maybe potatoes. I'm not sure. I've never grown some of these crops, and so. But like you say, I don't think very many people add micronutrients on a regular basis. They may add a little bit, maybe but sometimes it could be more like snake oil they're putting on.
What about, that's interesting. What about depth of topsoil? What factors that? We sell land in some areas in Saskatchewan or wherever where there's 2-3 feet of topsoil. And then secondly, hard pan, is that an issue? But maybe answer on the topsoil. Is that a big factor to you, depth of topsoil?
Absolutely. The depth of the topsoil is absolutely critical. My grandparents at Spruce Grove, my parents' land had 3 feet of topsoil, 90 centimeters, a meter of topsoil. It's like a no-brainer, right? Now, that didn't occur because my dad and my grandparents farmed right. That was there. It's taken 10 to 12,000 years for that to develop. And you're not going to change it in 50 years or 100 years. You're not even going to have a 0.1% impact. We can easily degrade soil way faster than we can improve soil, right? Because in lots of ways, farming is mining. We were growing a crop and we're taking it off and we're selling it to China, the United States. We're selling nitrogen, we're selling phosphorus that's come from our field. We're selling micronutrients. And so as farmers, we need to put back what we take out. And so I'm a big believer of not selling my straw unless I'm getting manure back, right? Because we in the Peace Country have very low organic matter. And so it's all related to where that soil developed. So when you see 3 feet of topsoil, that soil has been under grassland for 10,000 years. how that occurred, whether that occurred naturally through fires every few years. And so the Chernozemic soils, which make up lots of Western Canada, are tremendous soils. And because they were developed under grassland, they have neutral pHs, they have lots of calcium, magnesium, they have lots of organic matter. And so they're phenomenal soils. But it had nothing to do with the last 100 years. It wasn't magical. Unless you brought it out in a truck and dumped it on your field. Right. Yeah, that's the only way you could increase organic matter.
In my own case, hardpan, we're Solinetzik. We're on our daughter's farm right now, but the very half that we're sitting on, I deep ripped it years ago just to see if that would be a factor. It was huge. Where I left samples, my barley would be 10 inches higher the next year, but it dissipated. I think with no-till, it helped the percolation and the organic matter down there. But is there any permanent way to solve that hardpan issue that you see if you've got 5 or 6 inches of topsoil and then hardpan to deal with?
Yeah, and there's lots of soils in Western Canada that are Solinetzik or Solod. Solinetzik is bad, and then Solod is, you'd have more of a Solod here. And so I have some friends that rip every 4 or 5 years. Because what happens is if you limit your roots to the top 6 inches, in a case this year like we were dry, you're in trouble. Right? Because you're not going to get the yield. But if you can get those roots where they can go down a meter into the soil, and so you could rip, and then you could add lime, and that would help make it more long term. Another way is planting very aggressive perennials like alfalfa. Alfalfa will go through that hard pan and kind of put some permanent holes once it's dead. Right, because where the roots were.
Yeah.
So there are some crops that will help these Solod, but ripping and then again, I think you have to probably rip every 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Interesting. Thanks, Tim.
So, from a seller's perspective, would it be beneficial to point out some of these soil management efforts when selling land? Would a buyer look maybe beyond the CLI number if they recognize that there's been some soil management practices in place?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's important that the seller tell them that, what the management bid is. Mm-hmm. I just had a friend that bought a quarter that's polluted with scentless chamomile, right? And he didn't know it. He just bought it for hunting and stuff like that. I wouldn't touch that land because as soon as they work it, so now there's another factor involved. So it's not a soil factor, but all of a sudden you have noxious weeds. And in this area around Grand Prairie, tansy is out of control, right? And so these weeds can have a great impact on crop production, right? And so yeah, lots of other factors can play into it besides soils.
Mm-hmm. Well, another good segue. So how have things like precipitation, drought, flooding, temperature, how is that all factored in? Has soil changed much given those factors over the last 100 years?
Well, our climate's changed. We still haven't had a frost here up in the Peace Country, and this is, late September, which is, in the 30s and 40s. So the climate has changed. So that's one thing. But are soils going to change? No. All the best management practices, all the proper rotations, everything you do is going to change the soil maybe positively, but so minute in a lifetime that you don't realize it.
Right.
Where we, on the other hand, we can do the opposite, where we can take it down very quickly. And what happened in the southern prairies for years, they would summer fallow 50% and farm 50%. And then when a wind came, all of a sudden you lost a half-inch topsoil. Well, it's on the fence line. Where are you going to get that back? No one's going to go and pull it out of the fence line and put it back on the field. So it's lost. 10,000 years of work is gone in a few hours. And up here in the Peace, it's water erosion, or the northern prairies, it's all water erosion is just as bad as wind erosion. Because if you lose some of your topsoil, you don't get it back. It gets into the river system and ends up in the Arctic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
How has zero-till farming impacted soil ratings and soil quality?
Zero-till farming is the way to go, I believe, in most soils. Individual farmers will know whether it works or not. Is it helping the soil? Yes, it will help the soil. But significantly, no. I told you, 10,000 years you're not going to replace in 50 years. But it's the right direction to go, I believe. And it's really helping the south because now there's no wind erosion, right? Because if you got stubble, you're not going to have wind erosion. And up here, if you have stubble, you're not going to have near the water erosion unless it's a catastrophic event, right? And so, zero till soil is meant to have vegetation growing. And anytime you don't have vegetation growing, it's prone then to wind or water erosion. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you touched on it earlier, and I just want to talk about it a little bit more now. But modern tools like satellite imagery, drones, precision ag, how is that changing how we understand soils?
Again, it's going to be, I think we're going to be able to have better maps in the future, right? More accurate. But again, I could see farmers doing it themselves, hiring a little bit of it. And so it's going to play a huge impact. And so you'll probably have to hire a professional agrologist. I go on to some of these websites. There's a soil viewfinder with Alberta Agriculture. So they'll have that in each province. Boy, they're hard to get around. And then the CLI maps are online. Holy cats, it takes me an hour to find, right? Because there's hundreds of them, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where you can reach out and ask for some help. I was doing some reclamation work for an oil company, and at the hangar where we were, they were mounting this system on a helicopter so that they were going to fly, lines back and forth over the land and pick up all kinds of data. And I think you'll see more of that in the future. And so it should get better, especially with the technology we have today.
Yeah, for sure. Have you seen any examples where maybe a lower class rating has outperformed a higher class rating due to farm management, soil management?
Well, certainly. If the person knows they're limited and plant things like alfalfa and get bumper hay crops because the alfalfa will go through the soil layer and it's aggressive. But so sometimes you need to use only certain crops in certain lands. Plant only certain things. And if you plant the right crops, you may outdo the soil next door that planted the wrong crop.
Okay. Who would you say uses soil classifications the most today? Farmers, lenders, appraisers, or investors?
Appraisers should use them. I can't see, whether they're trained in them, I'm not sure, but they should be trained in using, both the CLI and the soil surveys, especially if they're appraising farmland. Ethically, if they're not doing it, I can't understand why. Farmers, on the other hand, I use it as a farmer, but again, much of the land is lots of times sold locally, so the farmers know ahead of time how that land is. And so, do I think lots of my neighbors have soil maps? No, I don't.
Thanks, Tim. As far as appraisers, what we see, because sometimes our sellers have got an appraisal, whether it be for an estate or whatever, they'll refer to it, but it's out of their, it's basically the old appraisal they'll take and they're updating it from that area. It's got the CLI, it's got the soil map, but it's not used. So they'll do comparisons and then adjustments, and they'll say, we'll adjust for this quarter 10% because that one is up in that area, but they'll never adjust and say, well, that was a CLI 2 and this is a 4, so we need to adjust.
Okay.
So there's reference to it, but I've never in any farm appraisals seen where they actually address it or adjust price because of it.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there any common misconceptions amongst buyers when it comes to CLI ratings?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty, it's just pretty standard. right? And it's not that complicated system, especially CLI, where it's 1 to 8, right? And 1 being the best, 7 being bad.
So it's pretty cut and dry, straightforward.
Pretty cut and dry.
Okay.
I cut off myself at number 3. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else there, Roy?
No, I just going back to what Tim talked about, unless you're a fescue guy or into some grasses, maybe the 4 works for that, because they'll maybe start looking at alkaline, whether it be pH, acidity, all that stuff. That might be bigger to them than some of the other numbers. Is that fair to say? If they're into specialty crops?
Yeah, I think a real major factor for many farmers is location. Yeah. Right? If it's next door, you really got to think about buying it, right?
You can make that work, yeah.
You can make that work.
It's a 7, but Tim's going to make it work.
Well, no.
No.
No. But, all of a sudden, though, farming has changed where all of a sudden they pull up their air seeder, fold it up, and drive 20 miles. Just like nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely like nothing.
Yeah.
Where you go back even 30 years ago, everybody farmed within 1 or 2 miles or 3 or 4 miles of their house. That was it. And now it's a changed world. But location is such a critical factor. If it's a number 4, it's right across the road, maybe I'd look at it.
Okay.
All right, and for anyone, buyers or sellers, if they want to better understand or interpret the soil classifications, what resources would you point them to?
Well, like I say, the CLI is online. Like I say, they're hard to navigate because I'm not using them every day. And so if you're using them every day, and maybe some appraisers are, they can get around like nothing. But boy, I tell you, I struggle because I use them, and I'll use the Alberta Soil. They're online. And so everything's online, and they're a tremendous resource. But figuring out these things. And so then you maybe hire somebody that can help you do that, right? Like an agrologist that, there may be companies that, they know those systems very well. I don't know the systems very well because I only use them every once in a while, or I taught a little bit about them. Mm-hmm. But, there are people that would be very familiar with the ratings, and you could hire them to help you.
For sure. Okay, that's all I've got. Roy, do you have any other follow-up questions?
No, I thought it was great. I think
Tim
answered a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
About where the numbers came from, and totally.
Yeah, that's still really interesting and mind-blowing, actually, that they just wrote out there and
it
all.
And they did a good job.
It's
just amazing.
Yeah. Okay, well, Tim, thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate your insight onto soil classifications. I think that's going to be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Farmland Exchange Podcast. I hope you found some value in it. Again, just a gentle reminder, if you haven't already, please like, rate, and review the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. If you have any questions regarding farmland sales, or if you have some topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email at info@CLHbid.com or give us a call at 866-263-7480. That also applies if you're interested in selling some farmland. Please reach out to us. We do love to chat. That's it for now. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was a positive exchange for you.